Well, thank you everyone for coming. Good morning. My name is Andrew Peak. I'm the president for CAHL. We got a little bit of feedback. Work with us as we live stream this event. I might turn some feedback. Thanks for coming, to Adventist Health for this Learning from Leader event with Scott Reiner, CEO of Adventist Health. Thank you, Scott, for your time this morning. We're pleased to have everyone here. We're pleased for the folks who are viewing this event remotely. This is part of CAHL, which is the local chapter of HHE for Northern California, is received an innovation grant from HHE to allow us to be able to purchase technology to stream these events for members who live all over California, in Northern California. And we're thankful to partner with the Southern California chapter, HCE. We have Tricia Kassab here, who is the president-elect for HCE. So this is really a statewide Learning for a Leader event that we're hosting for our memberships throughout California. And we're so pleased that we can launch this with Scott Reiner, CEO of Adventist Health. So before we jump in and actually do the introduction to Scott, we are going to ask some questions to Scott. We want this to be informal. If you have any follow-up questions with anything you're hearing from Scott, feel free to raise your hand. For the folks who are watching remotely, send a question through Microsoft Teams or send it to the email calcommunications@gmail.com, and Eric Johnson, who's our communications chair, will feed us those questions and we'll relay that. This is a qualified education event, so for ACHE members, you self-report this event, so you have to log on to your ACHE profile and add 1.5 credits for attending this qualified education event, which obviously help you as you advance towards board certification as a fellow in ACHE or recertification. So these are important events of what we host, and we do about 30 plus events, believe it or not, a year. So this week we actually have 4 events this week, and I have a great team on the board who are very active, which makes it easier for me, as the president for the chapter. But you have plenty of opportunities to participate, whether it's networking events, Learning for Leader events such as today, as well as more panel, face-to-face type of events. So, for folks who are not members who are here today or viewing remotely, we definitely encourage you to talk to a board member. We have Eric, who's here, Nikhil in the back, about as well as Tricia, about becoming a member of ACHE and the benefit of membership. Is Mo as well. Thank you, Mo, for being here. So with that, thanks for coming. We do have restrooms right outside if you need a breakaway, but we're just going to jump right into the Learning for Leader event. You're here to listen to Scott, not listen to me, right? So thanks, Scott, for being here. I'm going to turn the time over to Tricia,
okay, very good.
Who's the Vice President for Quality and Patient Safety for Adventist Health. A new position for Tricia, and we're so pleased that the role brought her to actually the CAHL geographic area, and we're able to do these type of events. So it's been a pleasure to get to know you, Tricia, and work with you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Andrew. Well, welcome everybody, and I want to give a warm welcome to those of you on the live stream, whether you up here in Northern California, Central California, or Southern California. So welcome everybody. And I want to introduce very briefly, because I'm going to let Scott speak to himself, speak about himself. Speak to yourself.
Speak to myself.
Okay, there you go. Scott
I do that all the time.
Yeah, I do too. That's a sign of, okay, very good. Scott is the Chief Executive Officer of Adventist Health, and he is going to be sharing with us a little bit about Adventist Health history and his journey as a Chief Executive Officer. Scott is a registered nurse with 30 years of experience, and so we'll be kind of chatting about his whole career trajectory. He served as Executive VP and Chief Operations Officer. He serves he's responsible for the day-to-day operations, and he's also on several governing boards. He also sits on California Hospital Association and several other committees. He also serves on the board of directors for the Baldrige Foundation and is a member of the board of directors for Loma Linda University Health System. And so with that, I'd like to give a warm welcome to Scott.
Thank you. Well, thank you. Yeah, I'm all mic'd up here. Want to welcome you, and I know you have some questions for me, but maybe I want to give you my welcome to being here. Appreciate Andrew. We tend to work out a little bit together in the mornings. Met each other at the gym across the street, and introduced himself, and this is a great opportunity that we can come together. And Tricia, thank you. Done an amazing job in helping us on our quality and safety journey. So welcome to Adventist Health. Maybe while you are thinking about some of the questions that you have, I can just give a little bit of a thought and an intro to what is Adventist Health, since I have you as a captive audience in our system office. So Adventist Health is an integrated health system spanning 4 states. We're primarily in the state of California. We serve 85 unique communities, and those go from hospitals to clinics to home care agencies to long-term care to hospice, as you might imagine, the entire integrated healthcare platform. We have 21 hospitals. We range from 500-bed teaching hospitals in Los Angeles to 25-bed hospitals in Northern California or in the kind of the foothills. And we are also unfortunately devastated last October by losing our hospital in Paradise, California, and the Paradise Fire. And we have not been able to regain services there in that community other than a clinic, which we established very quickly after the fire. We have over 5,000 physicians and providers that work with us every day. We have a large integrated platform for managing and operating physician practices in our California Medical Foundation. We have a health plan, all those bells and whistles as the health systems go. We're one of the largest organizations in the state of California, integrated systems, and we certainly are one of the larger platforms in the West Coast, running close to $4.8 billion in revenue. But most importantly, that's all the stuff that we do to care for our patients, but why do we exist? So you see behind us here, we're very proud to be representing our mission, living God's love by inspiring health, wholeness, and hope. Adventist Health is part of a network of organizations really across the globe, sponsored and started by the Seventh-day Adventist Church probably 100 years ago. One of our hospitals in St. Helena, California is over 100 years old. Now it's been rebuilt. Okay, it's not the exact, I think, no. It actually has, well, it probably has for anybody who's been at St. Helena campus, there's some pieces that maybe are 100 years old, but so we've been in this work a long time, really representing our core principle, our differentiating piece, I think, that we do and work on it every day is whole person health. And that's integration of mind, body, spirit, physical, mental, spiritual, and social. We want impact in people's lives, physically, mentally, spiritually, socially. And we think by combining those 4 aspects, we can let people and allow people to possibly live a more robust life, live abundantly. And that's kind of our core. The very original thought behind Adventist Health started in Battle Creek, Michigan, ironically. John Harvey Kellogg, you heard of John Harvey Kellogg? Founder of Kellogg's. Him and his brother created a food industry. Ironically, Dr. Kellogg was an inventor, amazing story, inventor of foods, and then he realized foods was not everything for the medical health experience, so then he went back to medical school. So he's an entrepreneur, medical school, and then he created one of the largest hospitals at that time in the country, if not the world, in Battle Creek, Michigan, where you had people from all over the country and the world actually come together as a sanitarium, ironically, which today we would call whole person health or well-being. Back then it was a sanitarium. So we come from a rich history of whole person health, living and competing and all the things that we need to do in basically 2020 to be the most effective health system we can, serving our unique communities.
Well, that's fantastic,
Yep.
Scott, and I think thanks for sharing
Yeah,
that
absolutely.
rich history
Yeah.
with Adventist. Behind me we have this fantastic branding of Adventist Health.
Right.
Be a force for good, and knowing that history and what Adventist has done to the in regards to being a force of good
Right.
to the communities,
Yeah.
is pretty spectacular. And I experienced that actually yesterday, just to give you a sense of the culture that Scott and his team have built and have continued over the years. I met with Scott in the morning just to prepare for this event. It's the Monday after Thanksgiving holiday, you're a little frazzled, you're coming in for a morning meeting. I walk through the front doors of Adventist Health, and they're greeting me as Santa Claus and Santa's elves, right? with claps and applause, and it was a nice welcoming party in regards to, again, being a force for good, which really I think for all the Adventist employees, and for myself being an employee of Sutter Health, I complimented them for really helping me feel welcomed and really enjoy that Christmas spirit, right? Which your team did so well.
Awesome,
yesterday.
they did a good job. Great.
Compliments to you. So, Tricia, when she introduced you as a nurse,
right.
As part of your background. So we're just going to kick this off as, you began your career as a nurse,
right.
A frontline nurse. How did that time prepare you for what you're doing today, and when did you decide to make that shift into management?
Yeah. Well, it's interesting. My background, my family background is my parents were both in the area of service. My father was a minister, and my mom was a nurse. So I thought early on that the combination of one, I was not going to be a pastor. I wasn't going to be great at that, I don't think. And I thought, well, certainly medicine could be a cool way of actually bridging both a personal mission and functional degree in healthcare. Never dreamed I'd be doing what I'm doing today. So first of all, if you think, if we're jotting notes, how do you get from A to Z or whatever this is? Never created this path for myself. It became clear a little later, possibly, that there were opportunities. But so the nursing part was, AS, bachelor's degree in nursing. I have a brother-in-law who was in health administration. Had his master's in hospital administration back when that was a specific degree. I always thought it was fascinating, that combination of mixing business with clinical, with something in the community, something purposeful, which I think probably to some degree is probably why a lot of you are in this room today, this idea of how do you tie all those things together and actually help people. So nursing became an area that I thought was pretty interesting to be able to do that. Floor nursing, my actual background is in behavioral health, mental health, behavioral health, and addiction medicine. And I found in that space an amazing opportunity to really meet people in a different way and understand the effect our environment has, and our society has on populations. So early stages of understanding population health. I also then spent time in nursing and acute rehabilitation, which I gained great appreciation for those who have been in that space. And behavioral is the same way, and that's that multidisciplinary planning for the patient. If you think about it, that's what we're trying to do today. Get the best minds around the table to determine what's the best possible outcome for a patient's care that is not just on a specific condition, right? There's this multidisciplinary idea of the therapist and the pharmacist and the nutritionist and the physician care planning, which I think really is a model we should be using in all of our patient care as we move forward. So with that, it's little things like, hey, you want to be a charge nurse? Sure, what is that? And then how about an assistant manager? And back in 1987-ish, or 89, there weren't as many organized structures as they are today for leadership development and pipeline development, identifying talent, all the good stuff and language we use today. So it became through progressive experiences of the nurse, the unit manager to the unit director. One of the probably cool things I had a chance to do is start a unit. So I was pretty young at that point, and how do you actually envision building a business plan and so forth. So it just kind of progressed that way. I did step out of specific nursing management for a while and spent some time running an administrator of a physician practice. I thought it would be a very beneficial. At some point, you're asking, somewhere in there, I kind of thought, well, I like this combination of using clinical background and understanding to build a business and administrate it. So about the same time, I went back, started my graduate program and master's in health administration, and then jumped over into managed care physician practices to gain that level of experiences. So the number of, one, if you're gonna, at least in my journey, if you're gonna, we've moved a lot, put it that way. There's been a few opportunities that, if you're in leadership, I can credit my wife and kids for putting up with that. You kind of sometimes have to go where the opportunities are. So we've lived a few different places on this journey, from being a nurse's aide at Glendale Adventist Medical Center to the CEO of Adventist Health. So the journeys look like nursing, it looked like practice management, managed care, it looked like vice president of specialty services, hospital CEO, chief operating officer, and then CEO of Adventist Health. So it's been a journey, all tied with clinical business, interwoven. If that makes sense.
Yeah, very good. Thank you.
You're welcome.
What a great career trajectory. Thank you. So how does being a member of the American College of Healthcare Executives influence how you lead?
Excellent. So early on, also, the benefit you have today, again, we're continuously, the organizations and structures and networking that's available today is outstanding. So ACHE and our organizations, and there's others as well, but ACHE is a great organization where you can start to see how the world is different and how the world is similar. So in this room, you guys could stand around the coffee pot back here and talk about similar things, but you could be coming from very different spots in the organization. And I think ACHE not only develops your skills, it actually allows you to see that that trajectory that's available to you in your career that you may not see by sometimes heads down doing the work in your own organization. So I think that idea of networking, broad expansion of ideas, development was critical for me early on, and I think it's probably been critical or will be critical for you in your work. And I would say be involved not just in ACHE only. There are other organizations where what's wonderful about healthcare, it's what 20% of our economy. Some people don't like that idea, it's too expensive, but it's so integrated in all that we do in this country. There's great opportunities just to be involved, be a participant, do that extra thing other than working and taking a paycheck home and being a leader in your space, but contribute to the overall thinking. And so I think ACHE also allows you to have a collective thought and a direction setting for the industry or the business.
Well, thanks, Scott. We sure appreciate your membership and ACHE and the college and for the wise counsel you provided there. It's so important to stay visible, and so I'm just going to throw that out to those in the audience. If you are interested in volunteering with the chapter locally, we're always looking for great volunteers, folks who are engaged, who are willing to help us carry out this work, help us plan these events. So just speak to one of us. We'd love to incorporate you and help you, with your own personal development goals and mission to be more engaged and active in your community and on your pathway towards continue to be a force for good. So with that, now let's transition, Scott, to here at Adventist Health.
Right.
What are the top priorities at Adventist Health and for you as CEO of the organization?
Right. Well, we can start at the solving world hunger level, and we'll work our way down. I think most importantly for Adventist Health, given our heritage, our mission, and our responsibility of the populations that we serve, I think we must be really significant everywhere we are. That's like starting at the highest level. So I challenged our organization last year. What does being successful look like, and what does being significant look like? How do we know, right, in quality and safety? When we're reaching top decile performance in quality and safety, fantastic. What else can we do? And is that success or is that significance? So how do we think differently as an organization with our 30,000 associates in 85 communities to not only deliver phenomenal mission-driven healthcare, what else can we do with the amount of intellect, talent, resources, energy to actually make our world a little better? So that's at the highest level of strategy. We are actually now preparing our 2025 strategy. We were just finishing up our 2020. Our 2020 strategy was really, if you will, organizing I would say, it's not a great word, but first word that comes to mind, a disintegrated affiliation of hospitals. 5 years ago in Adventist Health, we had hospitals, we had clinics into a integrated health system operating model to drive better efficiency, more alignment, better outcomes, as you might imagine in your work, and probably very similar work that where you are today. So that idea is that we had to create a platform of an organized and aligned organization for us to drive the better performance that allows us then to do something even more significant. So over the last 5 years, we pretty much have rebuilt Adventist Health into a integrated health system. This building here that you're in is representative of combining a significant amount of integrated back office services, shared services, and with Sutter and others. It's not a new idea, but for us, we were just, I think, a little behind. So we have caught up pretty rapidly, modernized all of our information systems, created shared services, and we've been on this incredible path to top decile quality and safety performance, which I'm very proud that we are reaching that. So this idea of quality and safety, so we've been, this last 5 years also have created a mindset strategically of everything is measured. So maybe it comes out of a Baldrige framework, maybe it just comes out of high performance. So we put all of our organization on a path to top quartile performance. So what does it look like? How do you compare yourselves? How do you know that you are performing at the highest level for our patients? So that over the last, if you will, 5 years, and we've also almost doubled in size. The last 5 years has been creating this platform of that allows us to be, I think, drive towards significance. We've almost doubled in size in the last 5 years. In our markets, additional hospitals, we're now managing a lot of Medicaid risk and those kinds of things. So it's kind of created this integrated delivery system. So what are we thinking about now? Maybe as your question. So what do you do the next 5 years? And what should we be focused on giving our platform? Who we are, what's our history or background, what our competencies are. So we're moving much more into the idea of how do we improve the health of our communities. So if you think of hospitals, well, that's a segment. That's not the only segment. If you look out in this community, any of our communities, what's going on with our populations that we have a privilege of serving? What are their health conditions? What's their access to care? How affordable is care to them, or how devastating could it be with, the bills that they might be receiving? What are we doing to look at the environment that we could participate in helping? We are in a lot of communities that are sole community providers, or the sole community provider, which tends to be, and some of you are probably from that space, you in a small community or moderate size, you tend to have the highest educated, you have the most resources, you probably have the most jobs. So this idea of what else can we do and should we do has been on our mind. So 2020 was building the platform. 2025 is becoming significant around improving the health of our communities. That's what I'm working on.
Yeah,
No, that's
excellent.
big. That's big. Doing some wonderful things. I love the word.
Low-hanging fruit, yeah.
Oh, yeah, I love the word significance.
Right.
That's really very, very powerful. And it's interesting. I recently attended the Institute of Healthcare Alliance, and there's a work group out there called The Office Visit is a Dinosaur.
Right.
And how do we start thinking differently in healthcare about whether, the patients are coming to us, why aren't we going out? And that's exactly what Adventist Health is doing.
Right.
We're going out to the communities and serving the underserved population.
Right.
So thank you. So Scott, what are you most proud of in your journey at Adventist Health?
Wow. That's I knew that question was coming, but that's not an easy one. I'm very proud of, many things. Very proud to be part of a healthcare organization that's driven, number one, for mission, the care of our patient. I've not worked in an organization that's been so aligned and so driven to fulfilling its mission, including making really difficult decisions or taking care of really difficult populations, whatever it may be. And there's others across this footprint, and whoever's listening are equally as passionate about their mission. So I'm probably most proud about the trajectory of fulfilling this mission. Then our associates, our employees, most proud of that and how they align to this and want to be a force for good, and how they want to align to do that work. Very proud of the movement practically over the last 5 years of taking a very this integrated organization and creating a common vision and people having confidence and courage enough to trust the process. For anybody who does a lot of change leadership rapidly and believe in a new destination. So I'm very proud that the organization has been able to do that, and we've been able to thrive during that period of time. But probably most proud of is the opportunity to not only just to envision what we're doing today, but what else can we do with this mission? I think in the leadership's interest and desire and energy to be significant, I think I'm most proud of.
And just to add to that, Scott, I know for CAHL, and I'm sure with HCA as well, we're definitely proud of the work that you and the team are doing at Adventist. When you post on LinkedIn that one of your hospitals receives the Malcolm Baldrige Award, right? I think number 2, right, in the organization. So 10% of your organizations are, you have definitely be leading the way in regards from a system standpoint with that recognition. So we're proud that you're able to bring that recognition here in our markets in California.
Absolutely.
Right? You were the only California organization, I think, that received the Baldrige Award this year. So a lot of fantastic work that you and the team are doing here, and we're grateful that you're able to share some of those best practices with us today. So feel free, again, if you have any follow-up questions as we're going through, just raise your hands, and those on the line, just write that question. We'll make sure we incorporate it in. And so, not seeing any questions. We do have some Q&A at the very end. We're just going to continue to go down the list. So let's, obviously, Scott, being able to motivate a team and get a team aligned with the vision and the priorities that you're setting, help us understand a little bit more your leadership philosophy, your management style. What is it? What's the culture of your senior executive team, would you say? Maybe share some insights on that.
Yeah. Something I learned early on, either I read it or it was fairly intuitive, and that's start with the end in mind. I think we talk about to be able to move from, if it was good thing, great thing, okay thing, moving from a nurse to CEO. I think probably one of the things that I had learned early on and be beneficial is start with the end in mind. Really, what is you have to kind of get at that 30,000 foot for a bit. And some roles are very technical in nature, and you've got to get there too. But if you can envision a future state of what you're doing and be able to communicate it succinctly and reverse engineer building a plan for it, your ability, your trajectory in your career is pretty high, because that is not always easy. A lot of people start with they start with the how, right? Simon Sinek, right? It's why, how, what. So the what is a byproduct of why you want to do anything. So I would really, I would say that my management styles, I want individuals that can portray a future destination. In fact, that's one of our competencies, or executive competencies, is able to articulate a future state, be able to set a vision, because if your associates can't see your vision, there's not a great chance they're going to be able to implement a lot of that. So I would say my style is find leaders who are certainly driven, aligned to mission, can set a future state, articulate it, communicate it, be able to build a plan for it, be able to build the team. Really, really critical is understanding what team members are necessary to do the work. So my style is I have these 5 or 6 competencies in my head I look for in an executive. And we actually train to that and teach to that. And so that would be my style. The other style is get out of their way. So once you have the right leader and there's the right accountability, check and balance about knowing what success looks like. So any of you that, this is, I can envision a future state, have the right competencies to do the work, keep me informed on your journey with data and information, not anecdote, but data. Not 12 pages, just 1 page, a little bit of the stoplight report, and tell me what's working and what's not working. And most importantly, what I can do to remove the logjam, which the higher you are in an organization, it feels like you are a big lumberjack. You're moving things out of the way for people to do their work. And so I would say that's kind of my style in the sense of how someone with a vision, accountable, drive accountability for them to do their work, and give them rope, give them the leash to go get it done.
Thank you, Scott.
You're welcome.
It's so true. You know, inspirational leaders really know how to paint that vision and what that looks like for others to be able to, you know, get involved and want to be able to live out that mission. So, Scott, you have a big job for all of the hospitals and clinics and so forth. How do you begin to prioritize your time? Where do you start?
Well, I grabbed onto this principle a while back, and that is operate at the top of your license. You know what that means? Only spend your time on the things that only you can do. So don't spend your time doing things that you're paying other people to do, which means you can interpret that however you want to, that micromanaging or doing the work for them, not holding people accountable. So I have learned over the years that, you know, and know yourself, right? So the combination of there's a combination of what your role entitles you to do, and that what your unique capabilities and competencies are. So it's that combination of, listen, I'll be honest, I'm not a detailed guy. So I was a much better probably CEO than COO, because I'm not as good an operator as I am more of a visionary thinker. So kind of get to know who you are, and that comes through a lot of years of experience, coaching, leadership development, know what your core competencies are, match it up to your role, and make sure you stay at the highest level of your role, if that makes sense. Don't be doing things that other people are doing that you're paying them to do, essentially. Your job is to select them and hold them accountable and set the vision. So I think that's where I would kind of land on that.
Great.
Yeah, definitely great advice there.
Yes,
you know, so yeah. Thank you, Scott, for sharing that. I'm thinking, you know, processing the information. I'm like, man, there's so many great nuggets here. I can't capture them down while I'm moderating.
It's a world of mistakes. That's right.
Well, I was just to say, you know, Scott, we failures. Yeah, well, you know, we appreciate your transparency and actually just your self-awareness and be able to, you know, identify kind of where your gaps are and where your strengths are, and then focus on what you do well. And I think obviously that's great advice for all of us in this room. So, you know, maybe pivoting a little bit, you know, around for just a generic question that you hear all the time, right? You know, what keeps you up at night, Scott? Like when the day is over, you know, what's going through your mind in regards to, you know, any initiatives or efforts that you're working on?
Yeah. Well, there's a couple. One, you know, you could certainly get wrapped around the axle and worrying about government changes, regulation changes. I don't, because you know what, that's always going to be there. It's always been there, and for some reason, if you've been around a while, you kind of realize that you kind of figure your way around it. I do think a lot about how are we creating the right value for. So you think about Andrew or Tricia, you might know this, where we're at 17-18% of national economies in healthcare. Is that the right number? Are we spending it on the right things? 19%. When I was in grad school, funny, that just tells you time. When I was in grad school, someday it's going to be 15%. Wow. I'm thinking, we're at 19 now?
Might be even higher.
So there's a couple things that go through. One keeps me up is, are we creating the right value for the work we're assigned to do? Are we providing the right? I'm actually feeling, to be honest, and Tricia should I'm feeling great about the work of quality and safety in healthcare in North America, period. We have come so far over the last decade. Probably the last decade was about quality and safety. I'm hoping the next decade takes that and just hardwires it. And I hope the next decade is about health prevention, health disparities, environmental things that we could improve the likelihood of not getting to a chronic spot. Of course, I know I just forgot your question.
You answered it.
Very good. So okay, yeah.
Actually, it sounds like you're sleeping well. Sounds like you're sleeping well, actually.
I actually sleep really well. So I think what keeps me up at night is how can we be the most relevant, and given the assets and resources that we have. You know, we're and Sutter's huge. We're like half, you know, $4.7 billion of revenue, and I think we have close to 1.5 1.5 to 1.8 million touches a year of patients, meaning that we have an opportunity to have an interaction. So I want to make, what keeps me up is, are we creating the greatest value? The quality value, yes, but are we doing it in the most efficient way? And where I'm really spending time on is, are we just dealing with, which is important, really, really important, and that is the sick care. Are we doing something more to try to change the trajectory? So then when you do think about that, what really keeps me up, how do you actually tell that story? How do you actually build the strategy and the structure? How do you go against conventional wisdom where, well, no one pays for community stuff and no one does this, we only pay for sick care? Well, that can't be the answer for very much longer. So what keeps me up is, what's the next thing we ought to be doing, and how do I communicate and motivate people to do that, and do the others, to continue to maintain what we have. So that would probably mostly is fulfilling that new strategy.
Yeah, great.
I sleep pretty well, though.
That's good to hear.
I have a gift of, my wife says I have the gift of sleep, so before the plane takes off, I'm taking a nap. So there you go.
You're very fortunate. That's so funny. Well, thank you, Scott. So you've touched upon the whole notion of value in healthcare. Where do you see the trends in the future of healthcare, including hospitals and ambulatory clinics? Where do you see we're going? Where do you think the next 5 years, what would it look like?
Well, maybe there's three things. I already touched on one, is that reverse engineered here, that we should know in the next 5 years where our next barrage of health disparities are coming from. We should have a better handle genetically what's in our communities, I'm hoping, what conditions are likely to happen, and what things we can do to try to manage it. Right, so we should have a better understanding of forecasting demand for services than we have today, based upon, I'm hoping, genetics and other types of things which are available today, but not at scale. Our clinical services have to be fully integrated. I still go back to the idea, I love this, I think it's still, if I'm not mistaken, maybe cancer rounds. The two areas in healthcare, acute care, where they actually sit around the table and talk about the care of the patient in an integrated way, are still, haven't been in a while, but behavioral and rehab, where you sit and say, whole person, how do we get this person to a better spot? Everybody. So this idea of our work has been way too siloed. Hospital and hospice and home care and ambulatory. It has to become much, much more integrated. So the data has to flow, the total cost of care has to flow, the total outcome has to be from a trajectory all the way through, not just that episode. So I'm hoping we will become more integrated. So that's kind of the acute care services. Obviously, more stuff's going to outpatient. I think I was reading something from Dr. Hockman up at Providence, and I think Providence is working on, I think they've identified 48 DRGs, of which in the next 5 years they anticipate will be outpatient. Hey, think about that. I don't know how many, there's a lot of DRGs, but there's a few dozen that are your core ones. If you imagine that 20-30% of those going to outpatient, what does that mean? Site of care, types of providers, does everything have to be done by a physician? How much technology is in there? How do you get paid for that? Is it going to be done remotely? Because when you're in a four-wall hospital, it's pretty, you have what you have, your hospital-based docs, and you have your nurses, and you have your staff, everything's all there. You bring the patient to the site of care. So how do we actually have a site of care that's not where the building is? I think that's going to be very opportunity and disruptive. And probably the last one, we got to create greater value in our work processes. Hospitals and then health systems have been so, it's just a cottage. It's built as a cottage industry. I used to tease a hospital administrator, it's like the mayor of the town. You do everything from talking to the public official to managing labor to, managing, and you take your pick, the business strategy down to some mission. It's like everything. Well, we're going to have to be really more comfortable about partnerships and leveraging scale with partners and figuring out what we do really well and what we ought to have someone else do, and how do we still fulfill our mission. That's what we're working on it. I say sometimes we struggle at that. We have a lot of partnerships. So how do you integrate two organizations to accomplish a mission, but everybody in their own space doing their specialty? So use the word you want to use, cost, waste, value. We have to take out a lot more of that in our current model. So I'd say the next iteration is take waste out, still on that journey, integrate our healthcare, and then be much more thoughtful about predicting where our services are coming from. We just can't always be stand and waiting, but that's a very expensive process. And, you know, we oversupply our markets with specialists, and let's face it, sometimes we don't have enough, and sometimes we have too many, because truthfully, if we forecast, we're able to forecast out site of care or forecast out demand for services or prevention, we won't need as many to do that work.
You know, thanks, Scott. And I think, you know, hearing what you're mentioning, I mean, historically with healthcare, you know, the core business has been acute care hospitals, right?
Absolutely.
Especially in the community, and still with a lot of the health systems that are included, you know, the hospitals are the core business where the revenue comes through. And so how do you, you know, continue to you know, leverage the expertise and the specialty care to branch out to more innovative type of healthcare delivery models? And so understanding where you project healthcare going, the trends going, what that you mentioned in regards to, you know, focus on prevention and population health, you know, for early careerists, what advice would you tell early careerists who are going to be the leaders in that future environment, you know, where maybe the hospitals aren't going to be the core healthcare business, right, and are going to be more focused on the critical care of the communities? You know, what experience do they need to develop to be successful?
Right.
You know, is it, you know, following the traditional, historically, especially for you know, healthcare administrators, is it the traditional pathway of becoming a hospital COO, hospital CEO, or is it maybe working at a physician practice or a urgent care center or somewhere else? Right. So curious about the advice you'd give to early careers for the future, as well as folks in the room who you know, are looking to branch out from maybe some of that traditional thinking of hospital delivery care.
Well, I'm gonna ask that question. Then I forgot one last piece of what the future trend. All those three things I talked about all have to be done in a risk environment. Population health, acute services, more integrated services, and tighter shared or tighter efficiency. The only way ultimately in the future you're going to get paid to create enough margin to reinvest is going to be through full risk, I think. Not 100%, but I do think government payers, other types of payers. So we need to be very comfortable in being able to, we have to find more of the top dollar, if that makes sense, the payers keep and so forth, in order to fund all those things of innovation. So I think we're going to have an environment where we're not afraid of risk. So careerists, I would say, you know, I don't know what everybody does for their job, but I would say try to take 20% of your time in thinking about where the future is going and start to prepare yourself for that. And in some cases, don't become a super expert in what you're doing today, although you need to do that, right? Don't say you don't have that competency, but spend part of your time learning, reading, ACHE. It's a sports analogy, apologize for this. So you kind of skate to where the puck is going. You know what that means? Yeah, you just anticipate, try to anticipate where things are going and spend a little bit of your time thinking about that. In fact, with the work that you're doing, build it right into the work you're doing, especially with those who, if you want career, as I'm thinking about it, that's a little bit what was helpful for me and earlier in my career was I tried to envision where things were going and sold my boss on it. He had my full-time day job, but I thought, well, what's happening here is that it might be going to this spot. And then, well, next logical, what does that spot look like? And then you have a thought, what does that next spot look like? Whatever the work that you're doing, hope this makes sense. Think about how your work is evolving and what's coming next. So by knowing healthcare trends, keeping core principles in mind that, you know, efficiency. No one wants to pay anybody more in healthcare than they're paying today, right? So keep certain guidelines in your head, but try to anticipate and then build that into the workflow that you have, the work that you're doing today, and make sure those around you, especially those who you work for upstream, understand that you think and you're willing to do some thought, have some thought leadership in that space. I think you'd be surprised how valuable that is for your career.
Great, no, thank you.
Great, that's great advice. Thank you, Scott. So how do you handle day-to-day operations with an outward focus on mergers and acquisitions that are important to optimize the needs of the community?
Right. Well, the question is, how do you manage through people?
Yeah.
I mean, I think, if you hire the right team, everybody has, there's an integrated strategy, right? And then everybody has a lane that they need to make sure that they fulfill, and then it does come together as a strategy. So it's all doable if you know what you're skating to, right? We're going through a process now, actually, for our 2025 strategy called, I think it's forward back thinking. It's a company called InnoSight. I'm not doing a plug for them. They're a really good company, but it was founded by Dr. Clay Christensen. And this idea is that it's just still the big ideas. We're actually doing today, what does 2030 look like?
Wow.
Okay. And then how do you back into 2030 to 2025? And then what would you need to do in order to fulfill the 2025 idea? So in order to manage all that, you really have to have a bigger idea what the destination might look like. And then obviously you create threads. For us, we have, getting very practical. So our strategy has about, 9 core elements to it, and each of them have a what we call playbook, right? So we built this in 2015, with knowing in 2020 we would have a certain outcome. And in your space, Tricia, with Dr. Asmar, very specifically, what the outcome is for 2020. In 2015, we assumed it would be one thing, and 2020 is the outcome. And it has to do with, in your area, quality, safety, cost effectiveness of clinical products and services. It has a clinical outcome, and it has a actual cost outcome. So you have to balance and experience all three. So the work is organized both at the highest level. What is the ultimate goal? What are the big things that we're trying to accomplish? We actually created in 2015 it's kind of a fun exercise, a Wall Street article, fictitious. We weren't in Wall Street, but we'd say, Wall Street writes about you in 2020, what does it look like, right? It's kind of a fun exercise. Adventist Health, yada, yada, yada. And so we had about 50 words that describe what we look like. If we believe that, so you have a strategy, and then we followed with what is the structure we would need to do to make that happen, and then what people do you need and what role, what are the core processes and so forth. So it's that reverse engineering idea. So it's a long-winded answer to your question, is that all things can be done. If you have the strategy and you're measuring the strategy and everybody can participate in their lane, but also understand how they integrate across the entire strategy. So working towards top decile clinical performance doesn't hinder us from actually adding 4 or 5 more communities. It's just there's different lanes of work. But in the end, we need to know that they're connected, because if they're not connected, we're wasting time and resources to the strategy. So you need to know what's inside the scope. But we organize our work in playbooks. Call them what you like in your own organization, but it's a very, very detailed, specific plan with targets and measures and metrics to what at every chunk of the way, every quarter of the way, what does it look like, and then we forecast out. So that's kind of the process we use in order to hit our targets.
Great.
I don't know if that answers your question.
No, excellent, thank you.
And just to continue on with that framework, over the past few years, there's been a lot of M&A activity, right? So a lot of large health systems merging, coming together. Adventist becoming integrative, actively acquiring, hospitals and other healthcare organizations. You have a beautiful campus here, with the new corporate headquarters. You mentioned that you're very, you measure everything, right? Everything is a data metric. With that, as these M&As, as these systems come together, the advisory board put out a piece that Tricia sent over actually that talked about health systems and how do you know when health systems aren't stuck in neutral or are stuck in neutral, as they come together and they are driving for more of economies of scale. Well, right. when do systems become too large that that economy of scale is not achieved or realized locally, in the communities? And so how do you know when you're not stuck in neutral, and what metrics help you identify that you are progressing towards your vision, your strategic priorities and vision?
Oh, that's a great, that could keep me up at night. In fact, I'm not even going to sleep tonight because of that question. We're kind of wrestling with that now. So one of the questions you started with, what is the right size for anything? Mm-hmm. You see a lot of trends across the country, big systems coming together. When you do that, you better have a pretty good understanding of what the future looks like. Mm-hmm. Because the larger you become, the less nimble you become. So there's an opportunity theoretically. I mean, we've done that to ourselves, or even our own leaders and directors would say that. We've kind of emanated our own organization by taking things out of the market, our own markets, and integrating them here for the same belief that we call speed, scale, and skill. You can do things at a scalable level faster, more efficiently, yada, 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 which is true. You lose a little bit of local flavor with that. So what is the right size? I don't know. I think the better question is, what does it take to serve a population? Whatever populations you choose to serve. In a lot of cases today, it's geographical. Sutter is a fantastic example of your footprints, I don't know, about 100-mile radius or something like that. So what does it take in order to be relevant in that space, to have enough critical mass, to have enough scale, all those types of things you need to think about for efficiency. So we think about that too. What's the right amount of organizations and communities to serve populations? I think what we're mostly focusing on is what population share do we need to have in order to fulfill and manage the populations that we're currently in. That's probably the bigger question. Just coming together. There's no judging other large health systems. Sometimes there's reasons, but just putting two things together doesn't mean there's a great outcome because of it. I mean, be very honest, you can spend the next 3 to 5 years just coming together, which is typically what will happen at a senior level. If anybody's been in that space before, you spend, who's doing what and how's it structured and this, that, and you're really not advancing strategy other than coming together. So you have to believe that scale. Now, we recently had a not successful attempt to create an integrated delivery system in Northern California. In that case, that was with St. Joseph's Health. In that case, our vision was and continues to be, how do we manage a large population, especially in Northern California territory of underserved population, a lot of geography. How do you become the most efficient? Pretty much 80% government payer. So how do we become the most efficient and not be over redundant? How do we actually drive down the cost to consumers and advance our capabilities? That is because we targeted our idea on serving a population versus just scale for the size of aggregating revenue. That gets very technical, I know, but so I think also in the future, if you think you know where healthcare is going, completely fantastic. I think a tightly integrated, nimble organization is going to be have better outcomes. So what's your goal, size or outcomes? For us, it's more about significance and outcomes. I don't need to be everywhere, but where we are, I want to be fantastic. Yeah.
Great. Thank you, Scott. What do you do when you're not leading Adventist Health? Tell us a little bit about your personal. What do you do when you're not leading a large organization?
I don't know. I think that's what I just do now. So we like to, I have family, my wife and 2 kids. We like to travel internationally quite a bit when we can, which is, so ironically, our son who's 27, because we like to travel internationally, we like to do mission kind of trips, and we like to see the world and nice places and uncomfortable spots. So our son now lives in Africa, and does humanitarian work in Zambia, Africa. It has a degree in public health, so global public health. So our international work has been very helpful for the world, but now our son's in like a million miles away. And our daughter went to World Experience, went to school in England and met someone from Norway, and now she lives in Norway, and very happily. She's here visiting right now. So we like to internationally travel, but we thought, well, maybe we should have just traveled to the United States. Like Montana and, New Orleans and just stayed within this country. I'm very proud of them. So what I like to do is spend time with family. my wife and I like to work out in the gym, do a lot of exercise. I love hiking and motorcycle, but church, faith, that kind of stuff. So it's tried to live that balanced life as much as possible, but probably where I would lend the most of the time would be with family, any way I can get it. And then exercise. Andrew knows that.
He does great. I definitely have to keep up with Scott. When I'm done exercising, I'm barely sweating. So I see Scott, I'm just like, I'm doing something wrong here. I need to get after it a little bit more. But no, thanks, Scott. That really wraps up the formal Q&A. For the remaining 30 minutes, we just definitely want to open it up to questions from the audience and as well as questions, from members who are watching us remotely. Before we go there, though, Scott, you had a couple hockey references in there.
Hockey references?
Yeah. Are you an NHL fan? Are you a hockey fan?
I do like watching sports. Yeah.
Okay.
Quite a bit. Yeah. I'm not a hockey player, but I do like hockey. Yeah.
Okay. Good. No, those are definitely relevant. And sports, obviously, with I'm a sports guy as well. So you can learn a lot in regards to just the leadership and coming together as a team and overcoming trials and obstacles and things like that. So sports are fantastic. So it definitely resonates with me when you bring in a sports analogy. So let me, what we'll do, if you have questions, go ahead and say questions and we'll repeat it for folks on the audience. So we'll just start with anyone here in the audience if you have a question for Scott. And if not, we do have one question for someone viewing remotely. Yeah, sure.
I do have a question. Scott, thank you very much. My name is Walter Stahl, president of the Stahl Company. We're a consulting firm, a regulatory process, construction management. You spoke earlier about, I believe it was 21 hospitals. I don't know if we were all in California or not.
Thank you. We have one in Hawaii and then 2 in Oregon.
Okay.
So 18.
And you talk about the disintegration and the integration, and one of the things that I'm curious about relative to California is the seismic retrofit program and how you are looking at that and how the Adventists are addressing it.
Yeah, it's a great question. We're very fortunate. My predecessors were very, I'd say, aggressive about compliance. So we've been compliant with 2020 standards for a very long, actually quite a while. Most of our cash, our balance sheet was kind of eroded in the early 2000s to seismically retrofit the organization. And we were also, we had 3 hospitals in Southern California, White Memorial, Glendale, Adventist at that point. Now they're all new branded, right? Adventist Health CME, Adventist Health White Memorial, and Adventist Health Glendale were all affected with the Northridge earthquake. So I think the total number was close to 300. At that point, that would have been 94. I think we got the money in 99, about 300 million. So we basically went on that path at that point, getting all of our hospitals aligned and under that path. So we're all seismically complete. We're not really having any projects other than now planning for 2030, right? So, and those who might ask, what does 2030 look like? It probably won't be as written in the plan today, but it will not be there if that's a double negative. We will, the politicians and others, and rightfully, they'll never say that we don't have 2030 standards, but I think there'll be some mitigation, I'm hoping, about what's in the details with that gives the hospitals a little bit of a relief.
Yeah, no, and thanks for that question. Just to, again, capture it for those watching remotely. So the question was about seismic upgrades in the state of California, and it's great to hear you guys are already there. I mean, that's a huge initiative, to become compliant for that. Very expensive as well.
Yeah.
Question for, one of our members watching remotely, Scott. It says Scott referred to 5 top competencies he seeks in hiring an executive. Would he please share what those are?
Oh boy, I think there's actually 7. Anybody might?
All right, so it's up to 7.
I'll try to remember. I probably won't get them all right. One is be a mission owner. Building the executive team. Setting a strategic direction. Performance driven, result performance driven. Being in the industry, it's not the right word, but it's being in the what would be the right term? Being in the environment, being in the industry. This would be an example. Your like would be an example of check that box. You know, you're not just heads down and you're actually networking, you're out in the marketplace, you're connecting, you're part
visible.
of it. You're visible.
Yeah.
You're visible. Trying to think of any others. Probably that's 5 or 6 of them.
Yeah, I mean,
Those are great.
you mentioned your again, your ability to find leaders who are able to execute and,
Right.
and be able to
Right.
really be independent, visionary, leaders, I think is something that I mentioned, that you mentioned. I heard you say folks who are able to, see a vision and then articulate it.
Yep.
And then work with their team to tell the story and implement it. So
What we do with that though, so we do set a set of competencies, and this is, we've really spent the last 2 years building this. It probably has this whole question about workforce development or pipeline. So we do have a set of executive competencies we lead to. We do then obviously have executive, we use executive coaching. So I'm a big supporter of leadership coaching and development and coaching to the competencies for you to be effective in your role within the organization. So it's this mirroring of what does the organization need? What are the competencies that are necessary in the role, and where are your gaps? We all have gaps, right? Clearly. So we do spend a fair amount of time on coaching to what are the gaps in the competencies. So we do tests, we do Myers-Briggs, we do coaching, we do 360s with our top leaders. We then take our next leadership level, we have a whole leadership institute, which we've established, again, competency based. So right now we're working through, and we have 200 leaders in the organization, which would be, I don't know what you call it, VP and above. And then there's 2,000 that are like director and above. So each of those segments have different levels of leadership development for them to fulfill their role, from director, manager to like an executive, and then executive to a top executive. So we've been very intentionally building that leadership development structure and then working towards developing pipeline leaders. That's just, good HR process or human performance process.
yeah, that's fantastic in regards to succession planning. I mean,
And then of course,
it sounds like
yes,
it,
exactly.
with,
Right, Andrew.
building your team and, obviously you've been very effective and successful at that with just what you were able to see and what you're able to see about what Adventist is doing in regards to the impact you have in the local communities. Any other questions out here? Yes.
Hi, my name's Asha, and this is my first year of being on Malcolm Baldridge Examiner.
Oh, wonderful.
So it made me very curious how an organization such as yours undertakes that journey and how it will do folks not just at the top level, but above the
Fantastic, thank you. I'm glad that you're an examiner.
Yeah, so the question was regarding the Malcolm Baldridge
Yeah.
and what it takes to actually, start the journey and continue to keep the organization focused on the Baldridge journey. Was that a good summary of that?
So maybe a question would be, do we have a culture of Baldridge within Adventist Health? So I would say this started a decade ago, and you as an examiner, you would know, the White Memorial, who just won the National Malcolm Baldridge for Healthcare, I think it's been a 15-year journey, because you have state, and then you have federal, and you kind of fail it, but no, you don't fail, but you don't make it at each of those, but you never just make it the first time. So a couple of things. So we, as an organization that was kind of, I hate to use this word, don't leave with disintegrate. We weren't completely aligned. We had quite a few organizations. We encouraged quite a few organizations to pursue the Baldridge journey as a framework. This is probably over a decade ago, as a framework for performance improvement, right? As a way of building the strategy. At that point, we weren't a system that would say we're all doing it. I don't know for those who've been on those journey, it's like, we would like you to do it versus we're all going to do it. Today, it's more like we're all going to do it versus we would like you to do it. So we had quite a few of our individual hospitals at that point start in this process. One was CAHL, which Adventist Health CAHL in Oahu, Hawaii, won it last year, and then 2018, and then the White Memorial won the National Baldridge in 2019. We have not pronounced as a system that we're doing Baldridge, but you're an examiner, if you would look at our strategy and our the way we organize our work and accountability and metrics, you would say, wow, this looks very Baldridge-like, and it is. So we have Dr. Asmar, our Chief Clinical Officer, she's a Baldridge examiner. We have quite a few, we have a lot in our organization that are Baldridge examiners. So we use that framework to organize our work. We have been encouraged by Baldridge to actually apply for it at a system level. There's not been a system this large with the Baldridge Award, and so I'm a little, that's a major undertaking. Although I think if you looked under the covers of how we organize our work, I would say we're organized a lot that way anyway, but we would need to take the, fill out the application, and then with people like yourself, find all those great gaps that we have in our plan, which we're kind of debating whether we should do that anyway. I mean, with 2 individual hospitals as a health system, the pressure is on me a little bit thinking, okay, why don't we just go all in and see what we can, not about winning it, but just start the journey for everybody.
Yeah.
Excellent.
Yeah, exactly right. I think that'd be fantastic, actually. I mean, we're talking about being visible, from a national standpoint with leading the way. And I guess, it makes me think a little bit from a follow-up question. As CEO of Adventist Health here on the West Coast, there's other, systems affiliated with Adventist. What are, and then we'll get to the question online. What's your interaction with the other Adventist health systems, Advent Health? I mean, is it?
Great question. People often ask, maybe in some ways we're like the Catholic system. There's many different Catholic systems, and they come together as we come together. So at a national level, we have a policy association where we actually work on federal policy and how we think about big initiatives like how do we improve health in our communities. We also share a lot in in back office infrastructure. But we do a lot of IT together, insurances and so forth. But we have been fairly independent. So a question is often asked, will we come together in some way? I don't know. I'd rather come together on something new than skate to where the puck's going. I think it'd be really interesting to take 90 Adventist hospitals across the country and create a really significant community well-being strategy versus just scale for scale's sake, if that makes sense, because we all have nuances in how we operate things. But we all part of a large purchasing organization. Those kinds of things we do together. The Adventist Church in itself has an international footprint. There's over 600 health hospitals and clinics around the world that are sponsored by the church. So the healthcare work, a lot of third world countries. So people often ask how we're associated with Loma University as well. They're a separate organization. I'm on their board, and they have one of their CEOs on our board. So we do a lot. We actually work a lot with our graduate medical education. We have a lot of residencies through Loma on our sites in Southern California and Central California.
Oh, good. Great. So this question is actually from Mike Choi from Loma Linda. He asks, increased employment have shown increased productivity and lower turnover. What are some initiatives that Adventist Health has taken to improve employee engagement?
It's interesting. We moved in 2017 when we really started a major transformation of the system. We were at about 25th percentile, 30th percentile on our Gallup. We're now just a tick above 80%, and it's not good enough. But it was during all this time of change. I think it has to do with organizing around. Well, if you go through the engagement, and if that's a measurement, right? So if we're just going to take the path of Gallup as how we measure engagement, as an example, then there's a portion of knowing how to take the test and train to the test. But that doesn't happen if it's not authentic and real. We've spent a lot of time orienting ourselves around what are these values. So being a force for good is only one of 6. Being welcoming is another. So you experienced that yesterday. We're a welcoming organization, so you experienced that as you walked through yesterday. So we have had, I think it's a lot about listening to our associates, identifying what, again, most people know the question, what tools do you need? Do you know what you're supposed to be doing? Do you have the tools to do it? Does your supervisor, manager actually spend time talking to you and making sure that you understand? That you understand what is expected of you and what you can do to improve the organization? And do we create a milieu, an environment that we use around our mission and purpose to make people feel like they're fulfilling purpose at an individual level. So we've tried to do all the classical things to build engagement and then leveled up with our mission. And, you know, it's never good enough, right? We want it, you know, we want it to be 100%, but we are making good strides on that.
Mm-hmm.
No, thanks for that. And, you know, obviously, it's clear, you know, as you mentioned, your focus on training and leadership development,
Yeah.
that definitely creates an engaged workforce. And, you know, obviously your support with professional associations such as ACHE, you know, we have quite a few Adventist health employees here, you know, today, you know, and so, you know, you being welcoming and open for them, you know, coming and learning more, you know, about, you know, who we are as an organization, you know, that definitely creates, I think, an engaged workforce. Any other questions from the audience here? Yes, sure.
You've spoken a lot about trying to figure out where the puck's going to go.
Right.
What are your top sources of information for making that decision about where the puck's going to be?
Great question. So one, I think you have some guiding principles, ideas. One would be on efficiency, which is probably not the most exciting thing to start with, but the idea that healthcare still has a lot of inefficiency in it, and no one wants to pay for that. You and I don't want to pay for that through our taxes. I mean, all these things, we want to be more efficient, so that's a guiding principle. You know that legislators, that's another stakeholder group, are driving towards affordability to the person. So now those are two economic. So you might anticipate strategically, well, how do I make things more affordable that is real to the consumer, satisfies legislators, and literally takes costs out of the system. So that would be an example of one thread of how do I manage to affordability. And so that would be influenced by your own data, national data information, political pressure. You know, you can also look at where you want things to go and look for opportunity, like community well-being. There's an amazing amount of information and data. So we have looked at the information we call the diseases of despair, suicide, drug addiction, poverty, and depression, and the prevalence. I mean, data and information. It'd be, you know, suicide rate has doubled in adolescents over the last 3 years, and the adult. So you look at this national data. I look at it from all these various stakeholders that influence your work and ask them. In fact, we just finished, that's a great question. So we just, in preparation for our 2025 strategy, we took a bunch of stakeholder groups and just asked them, where do you think it's going? So we spent a lot of time with Cerner, our big IT partner. Where do you think it's going? We spent time with other health systems. We took time with government and say, where do you think, where should we be skating to, if you will? And then back it up with data. I mean, I never want it just to be anecdote because the data suggests that's the right direction.
Great.
Yeah, great. Yeah, great question. You know, with hockey, you know, for me, when I watch hockey, I have the hardest time actually visualizing the puck. You know, it's so hard to see that thing, right? And, you know, they even have, when you score, they have the sirens and the light that goes off, so you actually know when the puck goes in the net. So I think, you know, that question's spot on. It is very difficult to, you know, visualize where that puck is going and forecast it, right? But it does take that, almost like that art science, right?
And read, try not to stay in healthcare. I mean, macro trends of business are very important. How anything innovation, IT related, you know, everybody talks about all the time, what's Amazon doing, what's Google doing in healthcare? I don't know exactly, but I'll tell you one thing, they're going to make it much more efficient, and they're going to be very consumer driven. So if you think of those two things, we need to be more consumer focused and be more efficient and provide value at a cost level. So that's what they're going to focus on, and they'll make it there faster than we do, probably.
Nikhil. Okay, so I'll just repeat this one with Nikhil since he's farther back in the room. So the question was, how do you stay connected with what's happening on the front line, you know, with your frontline team today?
That's a great question. So here I'm talking about, you can look at all kinds of data points, right? But the truth is, how do you actually touch and feel and know? probably not enough, and unfortunately, the higher you get in the organization, it's harder to be other places. So there's, of course, there's the formal process, your engagement, your bidirectional communication and focus groups and those kinds of things. There's no substitute for actually getting out into the marketplace, and so I have been good at it, and then not good at it, and then I get good at it again in 2020. We're going to spend much more time. Not talking to, ironically, it's not going to be talking to our leaders, if you will. We have all that, right? We have all the data and the information. We have the finance. We have the quality, supply cost, all that stuff. What I want to know is how this really is impacting people taking care of our patients, and just have a very structured process of try to hit one community, 2 communities a month. So I'm actually building that. I did that a couple of years ago as we built the first plan, kind of a listening tour. I love our leaders, but that's not, all the real action is where the middle management, that's what really drives engagement. It's not what I do. It's middle management. So I want to be able to go out and see if our middle management is actually affecting the change necessary with their associates. So that's a great question. And if you have any suggestions, it is not easy. You need to push all kinds of information. You can send newsletters out and videos, and but I think if they see you actually in the marketplace, touching and feeling what's happening, and then and letting them know that you've done that, I think it instills a little bit of hope, right? Or confidence.
Yeah, Scott, you experienced this in your nursing background, right? As an A&M or nurse director, typically in the hospital standpoint, those are the employees that have the most direct FTEs, right? And making sure that they're trained and we're trained, have the vision, have the the skills. Right. Exactly. I mean, that's where you're going to get the most benefit.
Inspired to do their work.
Exactly. So. Any other questions at all for Scott? All right. Any other questions, Eric, from online? Okay. Remote? Well, Scott, we sure appreciate your time. I mean, I know, putting you on the spot here and really, getting to know who you are as a human being and as a leader for Adventist. I mean, we're so proud that, one, you're a member of ACHE, and that, you're here influence healthcare, locally in California. And so we thank you for your time, and, thank you, audience, for being here this morning. And definitely, don't forget to, again, self-report your events and reach out to Nikhil, myself, Eric, Mo, if you have any follow-up questions regarding ACHE. Tricia, any final remarks from you?
No, I want to say thank you for those that are here today, as well as those that have been live streaming. Both from Northern California as well as healthcare executives of SoCal. So thank you, everybody. Thank you, Scott.
All right, thank you.
Thank you, everybody.